Well, Don, it's not about race, as you like to make it, because that's easy and lazy. It's about economics. My comment back to Maria is your children are going to have a much better economic future and a better chance for a good job.
All of my homies around me, they know that ain't nobody perfect. We've been grinding for a minute, I told them it's gonna be worth it. We just speak it to existence, so nothing is left unsaid. Much love, but if you ain't family or business, you left on red, left on red.
Let me, you called on me, so let me finish. Truer words, minus
you know what, John Fredericks?
Have never been said down in the Oval Office.
John, until that last comment,
I'm
going to cut you off. Can we please cut him off? Can we take him off the screen? Can we get rid of John Fredericks? Thank you. First of all, I was going to let him speak until you doubly insulted me. I don't even need to respond to the lazy comment. I laid it all out in the thing. We can have this conversation, and we don't need someone who's going to make excuses for racism.
Information, and then engineering social consequences for that person for being out in the streets as a white supremacist and making threats against minority communities. You do not get to be a Nazi on the weekend.
The St. Louis Rams causing an uproar among police after several players take the field with their hands in the air. And it has had staying power. Even months after the grand jury decision, Pharrell turns his hit Happy into a dark performance, incorporating the tagline at February's Grammys.
Hands up.
The words echo through Congress, too. Some assuming it is true that Brown actually had his hands up. For others, it is a symbol.
We want you to know that our hearts are out there marching with them.
Here at CNN, a panel of commentators moved by the protests put their own hands up after the grand jury decision. Some people celebrated it, but others were outraged by the continued use of the phrase.
The St. Louis Rams think it's cool for them to suggest that St. Louis cops shoot young black men who have their hands up in the air when we know that that was a lie? It's a lie.
Washington Post writer Jonathan Capehart concluding this week that hands up don't shoot is, quote, built on a lie. In fact, a Department of Justice report concluded that evidence contradicts eyewitness claims that Brown had his hands up.
Black Lives Matter.
All lives have value.
Really? How so? Why does white life have value?
Well, I think
for who? No, excuse me. For who? Our argument is that white life is wrong.
Why?
Our argument is that we should never affirm white life. That your argument of just affirming all life in general is not good, especially not good for black people when white life itself is based off of black supremacy.
Why shouldn't we affirm my life?
You're probably white.
I am white. Why shouldn't we affirm my life?
I don't understand why I have to care about your life anyways. There's no ethical reason as to why white people deserve to live. Affirming black life means that white death has to occur. That's why you should lose this debate and why your life ain't worth affirming.
Can I kill myself, like, under your arguments?
Sure.
Okay. So, should Odie kill himself?
I don't see why not.
Why should we do that? How does that help?
It's ethical.
How is it ethical? We all have some form or another of privilege. Why does that mean we should kill ourselves?
Because you have white privilege.
Why does having white privilege necessarily mean I should kill myself? Why shouldn't I, like, struggle against the structures?
Sure, struggling against the structure means putting yourself on the line, putting your body on the line. Do it. Affirm your suicide. That's cool.
That's very good.
I mean, it's, you know, it's one little form.
Latasha Ned was arrested back in September after videos emerged of her declaring, quote, open season on crackers and suggesting people start walking up on untrained police officers and stealing their weapons. She says the videos were selectively edited and never meant for public consumption. Here's a clip.
They've been coming for our throats. They've been coming for our lives. They're killing our women, saying that they committed suicide. They're killing our unarmed men for no reason at all, for petty crimes or nothing at all, for traffic stops, your tail light out, and you getting killed.
Latasha and her attorney are with us in a moment, but first, Trace Gallagher has more on her arrest. Trace?
Megan, a county judge ruled that when Natasha Led was seen brandishing a gun and a machete and saying it's open season on killing cracker cops, it was enough to move criminal charges against her to a superior court. But now Ned and her attorney say she wasn't threatening cops or white people.
I maintain that I have the right to defend myself from these hate-filled rants from this group and their supporters. At no point did I ever want to kill or hurt law enforcement officers, and the unedited version of these videos will prove that fact.
Except she and her lawyer never do explain how the statements "kill crackers," "take a gun from a cop day," and "take over police stations" were taken out of context. Latasha Ned, you'll remember, is part of the Ethio Flag movement, an offshoot of Black Lives Matters, and though she now claims that she never threatened white people, while she was being led into the police car and asked, "Did you threaten to kill white people?" she reportedly responded, quote, "Well, they killing us."
You retweeted this side-by-side of a story about the new NFL policy, and here it is, a story here, a headline at least, about a German football club, presumably in the 30s or 40s, that was punished for not giving the Nazi salute. Do you think that's an appropriate comparison?
I think it's dangerous to not pay attention to the warning signs. You see how back in the 1940s, in the 1930s, the Nazi legal scholars, Nazi lawyers, attorneys, when they were trying to figure out how they were going to configure their new Nuremberg laws, they looked to the United States as a model for their racial laws, and that's just the truth of history. And you know, there are distinctions that I think we need to be careful not to miss these signs. And again, I'm not saying we're Nazi Germany, but you know.
But you know that's how some receive that. I mean, usually comparisons between comparisons to Hitler or Nazism are usually ill-advised. But you see this one as a fair one.
These white motherfuckers out here, y'all not with my friends. Fuck y'all. Hey, what y'all think? What they think? What that be your chance? 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 Don't worry about it, bitch. Shut the fuck up. I don't fuck about none of that. I don't give a fuck about that.
What kind of a guy was he?
He was a friend of mine.
For what reasons?
For what reasons was he my friend? Do you need to have a reason to be a friend of somebody?
I'm just asking you to describe him as a person.
Oh, to describe him as a person? Obviously, I know the people in the Western world are not going to want to hear this, but truth has to be said where it's due. And he's one of the most loyal friends I've had, trustworthy, honest, upstanding.
Were you surprised when you saw videos of him cutting off people's heads?
It's surprising, yeah.
You didn't approve?
Did I approve of the act or did I approve of the video?
Did you approve of the act by your friend?
I'd rather not answer that question.
She's one of the organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement.
What? No racist police.
And yesterday, Yusra Kogali helped lead a march on Queen's Park decrying racism. In February, however, Kogali posted what could be interpreted as a hate message of her own on social media. News Talk 1010 found this tweet. "Please, Allah, give me strength not to cuss, kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please, please." The tweet was removed, her account locked down, and no one from Black Lives Matter has responded to our request to speak today. Yesterday, Kogali got her chance to talk to the Premier.
I'm Kathleen, and you're? I'm Janaea Khan. Janaea, hi, how are you? And you're? Yusra. Hi, Yusra. Nice to meet you. Hi.
A conversation where she and the Premier discuss anti-black racism.
The reason we're setting up an anti-racism directorate is that I believe that we still have systemic racism in our society.
Anti-black racism.
And then there you have it, video on social media that was able to fill in the picture. Now, before we show you this video, we should warn you that it is very disturbing. Take a look.
Yeah, grabbing it.
nigga. Fuck cut his motherfucker. Oh, shit, boy. Damn, you cut it. I put a whole patch out of this shit, boy.
Why you do that?
Ain't no blood on the blade, though. That was you get. Donald Trump.
Oh, my brother,
Y'all see this hey, right here? He represents Trump. This PPG hothead. Hey, this PPG hothead speaking. Y'all see this right here? We finna put this in the trunk, and we finna put a brick on the gas and let that you understand?
He was also there tonight wearing a bracelet that said, "I am Darren Wilson." Now, this is what Rohrer told me from his perspective as to what happened in the moments leading up to when things got out of control.
You know, as I tried to exit, she continued to do that. 2 or 3 other anti-police radicals rushed over, and things de-escalated, or escalated from there.
Black Lives Matters signs. Now, it all began when Dartmouth College Republicans put up the school-approved display during National Police Week, but just hours after it went up, Black Lives Matters activists took matters into their own hands. President of the Dartmouth College Republicans, Michelle Nesbaugh, goes on the record. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to be on. Thank you for having me.
So on Friday, you had this display up honoring the police. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what happened?
So the night before Thursday evening at around 11 p.m., we put up our display with some statistics about police officers who have been victims of violence before. We had statistics about September 11th. Every 61 hours, a police officer is murdered in the United States on general. And the next morning, we got up and we saw that our display was torn apart and replaced with Black Lives Matter posters. Later that day, we went through, we talked to the administration, and there was a lot of mixed signals. Around 5 p.m., we were told that we were not allowed to replace our display because throughout the entirety of the day, 25 Black Lives Matter protesters were standing in front of the billboards. Not only did they replace our billboard with their display, they also replaced all of the other billboards in the Student Center with Black Lives Matter posters and posted pictures of our club members' faces with Sons of Old Dartmouth written over it.
People's lives are being shattered and destroyed by a mere allegation.
The word bully stands out because some people are calling you a bully. In fact, conservative commentator Eric Erickson, I want to read you what he has said. He said, having someone apologize to you and then refusing to accept it unless conditions are met is what bullies do. What do you say to that?
I don't agree with it. Just like Laura, she can have her opinion, he can have his. It's up to them, but I don't agree with it personally.
Laura Ingraham has invited you back on her show for a, quote, productive discussion. Would you consider doing that?
I would only consider doing that and after she apologizes to all the people that she's hurt throughout her professional career because of her immaturity and unprofessionalism. It's not right, and I think she needs to apologize to those people that she's hurt.
Sadly, Ingram probably won't be the last person to attack you. Do you worry at all about this kind of back and forth becoming a distraction to your main mission and what you're trying to accomplish with gun reform?
They got violent, smashing windows of stores and cars.
I'm going to be working on a candidate basis to ensure that the best people that are willing to serve their constituents and not special interests are getting into office.
Which candidates have reached out to you?
There was mainly one that's going against Steve King in Iowa that has reached out to me, and a few have reached out to me, but I think at the end of the day, what's important is that we all just really come together and work on this, not as Democrats or Republicans.
That means I'm one of those more militant Negroes. And you know what I'm here for? Because these redneck motherfuckers murdered Sandra Bland because she had nappy hair like me.
I have no doubt. Good luck to you.
Yeah, good luck.
We're not the enemy.
So do you agree with Malcolm X that white people should be killed? Is that why you're here?
You damn right I do.
You do?
You think I'm scared to say that to you?
You think white people should be killed, huh?
Thought we should be killed when y'all came and stole us from Africa and put us in chains and murdered us for over 400 years. So yeah, you do need to die. I think everybody else on the planet will have peace when you're dead.
Are you responsible for what your parents did?
Listen, I'm talking for me. I answered your question.
All right.
Now I'm done talking because I don't negotiate with fucking terrorists.
A lot of white people in the crowd. And that wasn't a joke.
The reality is that Fox News has not been friendly toward the interests of or perspectives about African American people or Latinos or a whole range of other minorities. And I think that when we begin to sling around the term racism, people get offended and think, well, the right says it, the left says it. Well, bias is one thing, racism is another. Racism is the ability to impose your viewpoints, biased as they are, as normative, and then have the power to reinforce them as necessary and primarily exclusive. So I think in that sense, the institutional power that's wielded by a place like Fox News certainly has to be called into question. And the fringe, as he pointed out, of the Republican Party has to be taken to task for the racist elements that are there.
Really? We're going to go there with a news channel that they're racist? You know, we can't have an honest conversation about race in this country because of things like this. Everyone wants to hurl the racism charge, particularly towards Republicans and towards conservatives, simply because they don't agree on policy. And we try to take policy disagreements and turn them into racial issues when they're not. I think it's time to grow up. Honestly, I can't believe a week after the Andrew Breitbart story broke, we're still talking about Shirley Sherrod instead of the economy, jobs, you name it.
I don't want to stand up here and be angry because this isn't for me and this isn't for you. It's for the people that we lost and the people we may lose tomorrow and the people we lost yesterday. But I thought I'd take the moment to just list out some facts that many of you probably don't know because you're white.
Tax cuts and stimulus opposition and opposition to Barack Obama are not racist.
The opposition to Barack Obama is a witch doctor. Tell me, sir, why the reference to his ethnic particularity has anything to do with his public policy. Be opposed to his public policy.
That's what I'm wondering.
What I'm saying is that the witch doctor motif has been perpetuated by the Tea Party, and on top of that, when we talk more specifically about Fox News,
it hasn't been perpetuated by the Tea Party, just by a few people who were crazy enough to hold up signs.
You know what?
We can't paint with that broad a brush.
I'm offended by the language of uprising applied to people who are breaking into other black people's stores and looting them. This is a lack of values. And people who are destroying private property, destroying cop cars, in an uprising against what exactly? Against the black police chief, against a mostly minority police force, against the black mayor, against the black president, against the black attorney general, against against a city council that is 9 of 15 are black and all 15 are elected Democrats. What is the uprising against? What is it seeking to achieve? I still don't see what exactly the riots are seeking to achieve. Bottom line is, this is all, it all could be boiled down to just act like a mensch. Act like a human being. Honestly, it's not useful to riot, it's not useful to break things, it's not useful to throw rocks at people. And the idea that we're supposed to sort of correlate your level of outrage.
I'm going to stick to the 30 seconds on this
the last sentence. The last sentence. The idea that we're supposed to correlate your level of outrage with a certain level of justification. In other words, the more outraged you are and the more angry you are, the more justified you must be, is absolute nonsense.
Yeah, you know, to say that people who weren't there marching in the civil rights movement are now all of a sudden marching in the streets and that's proof of racism or something. No, it's not. It's proof of people being hacked off by the growth of government. And certainly there are some people out there on both sides. I mean, saying the Tea Party is racist is like saying all Democrats support cop killers because a few Mumia Abu Jamal people show up and have free him posters. I mean, we're painting with too broad a brush here, and we should be having a serious conversation about race, but we can't because we're too busy into stereotyping.
As a black man, I do understand that Black Lives Matter. You know, I stand for that. I believe in that wholeheartedly. But I also think that there's a way to go about things, and there's a way to do things. And I think the issue at hand needs to be addressed internally and before we move on, because from personal experience, you know, you have living in the hood, living in the inner city, you deal with things, you know, you deal with people dying, dealt with a best friend getting killed, and it was two 35-year-old black men, you know, and wasn't no police officer involved, wasn't anybody else involved, and I didn't hear anybody shouting Black Lives Matter then. And I think that's the point we need to get to, is that we need to deal with our own internal issues before we move forward and start pointing fingers and start attacking other people. We need to solidify ourselves as a people and deal with our issues, because I think as long as we have black on black crime and black, one black man killing another, if Black Lives Matter, then they should matter all the time.
The median black family worth is just $1,700, while 40% of black families have zero or negative wealth. White family worth, in terms of financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't... You know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.